Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 222. So here on the 22nd of March, 2022, we have session number 222. I know, unfortunately, I couldn't have timed it for February 22nd, which would have been the ideal date, of course, for session 222. But there we are. Anyway, we are back. So just a few quick announcements here this evening. Joe Snake wants us to do 2 slides today. You think? I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we can do 2 slides today, but I doubt 22 will work out, Chris. That probably won't happen. Just a few announcements coming up. First, we have our regional moots, of course, coming up this very week. We have our first spring moot. Tex Moot is happening in Austin, Texas this coming Saturday, and then next Saturday, the 2nd of April, will be Sunshine Moot down in Orlando. So join me for one of those 2 things. We've got a bunch of fun stuff going on. You can come in person if you're nearby, or you can tune in digitally to either one of those. They're going to be fully hybrid moot experiences, so that you can join us for either one. Another thing I wanted to mention is that this Friday, on the auspicious date of March 25th, on Gondorian New Year, that's going to be the last day to submit proposals for Mythmoot this year. So, of course, our big Mythmoot conference, our big annual international conference, which is in the last weekend of June, is going to be the proposals date is closing this Friday. So, good, JJ. Glad you got your proposal in. That is exciting. Very good. So yes, at the end of the day, on Friday the 25th is when that is going to be happening. And I also wanted to draw your attention to, as we're getting closer towards the end of the month, our space program is moving right along. We have our biggest months ever coming up. We already have more people registered for space modules in April than have ever registered in a month before. Really exciting times here. These are the confirmed modules for April. We've got some awesome things. The Bridge to the Silmarillion, if you're one of those Lord of the Rings fans who's always had a hard time, enjoying the Silmarillion. And there's no shame in that. It can be really difficult to get into. The Bridge to the Silmarillion module is designed to help people kind of make that transition. We have our history of anime class. We have Old Norse. We're starting an Old Norse cohort for people who want to learn Old Norse, one of the dearest languages closest to Tolkien's heart. We have our conversational Spanish module, creative writing, the history of anime. So much stuff going on. Lewis's Ransom Cycle, we did Out of the Silent Planet in the Mythgard Academy last year. That's looking at all of Lewis's Ransom Cycle with Serena Higgins. Really fun stuff. So anyway, definitely want to, the time is running out for these. These start the beginning of April, right? So there still is time to register for those, but time is running out. And again, the way that you do this, it's really simple. First, you buy space tokens. You can buy 1 or up to 6 at a time. Those are good for any time, and you basically just kind of turn them in 1 token per module, per month-long module, over the course of however long you want to do them. So anyway, I also would like to just kind of point out in May the ones that we are proposing for May. We've got a whole bunch of really fun modules coming up in May. We're starting a series of modules if you've ever wanted to learn Klingon. So we've got a series of Klingon modules. And this is another one of our new modules. It's called Natural or Synthetic. It's a module on invented languages. And in particular, it's designed to, if you've ever been, whether you're a gamer or whether you're a writer or, somebody who's writing a game or whatever, naming can be really hard, right? And often when you're making up a language of your own, whether you're making up a full language or you want to make up place names and people names and stuff and have it work and have it fit, that can be such a compelling part of a creative world, or a really dissonant part of a creative world, one or the other. Well, how do you know how to put sound combinations together that are going to work and that are going to make sense and that are going to really fit organically? So that's what that module is about. It's about the way that sound patterns work in languages and how you can better shape invented languages or invented names of your own in order to make them fit or work. Really cool. So anyway, so lots of fun stuff happening. We're starting a new cohort of Latin. We're starting a cohort of beginning Greek for people who want to learn ancient Greek. Pity in the Lord of the Rings. That's going to be a fantastic module with Tom Hillman. Really, obviously, really important theme. Some great stuff going on there. So lots of awesome things happening in space in May and in April. So just go to signumuniversity.org/space and you can get involved in our really fun learning community. As I say, the space community has been really expanding over the last couple months, and it's just been exciting to see. Space is a fun opportunity. There are lots of places online where you can, there are lots of places online where you can learn stuff on your own, asynchronously. You can go to YouTube and you can learn stuff, right? There's lots of places you can go to learn stuff. There are lots of places you can go to take courses of various kind, right? Paying usually quite a bit of money to take a bunch of courses. There are comparatively few places where you can go that are completely online and yet invested in the kind of small group discussion classes, fun, engaging small group discussion classes where in that kind of a supportive and encouraging environment, you can learn a lot of these things that, you've always been curious about or always wanted to do, new languages or new literatures or whatever else it is that you want to do. Anime, we have a bunch of anime modules that we do. So that's what space is all about. Space is designed to be that spot which really fills a need, I think, for a lot of people who have been taking it have been really expressing how grateful they've been for that opportunity. So love sharing that with you guys. Last thing just to mention briefly, tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, what day will that be? The 23rd, that's the date it will be tomorrow, of March, is going to be our fourth episode of Other Minds and Hands, my new broadcast about adaptation, especially in Tolkien. We're going to have a new special guest. The Clueless Fangirl from YouTube is going to be joining us to talk about Numenor, and we're going to be talking about Numenor, what makes Numenor such an interesting and powerful story, and then we're going to be talking about some of the adaptation choices about Numenor, especially thinking about the timeline question in the Amazon series to come. So we're going to be talking about some of those things tomorrow, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you can join us there. But anyway, all right, let us move back forward into the text. So we were talking about Bill the Pony last time, of course, everybody's favorite pony. My title for this session was Waiting on the Doorstep, because of course that's what we find them doing. They're not waiting on the doorstep of a dragon's den. It's an odd thing that's happening here in this passage because they're waiting on the outside on the doorstep, not to get in, but to leave, right? And this is one of those moments in the story which can so easily pass by you when you're reading at, anything like a normal speed, right? Their farewells had been said in the great hall by the fire, and they were only waiting now for Gandalf, who had not yet come out of the house. A gleam of firelight came from the open doors, and soft lights were glowing in many windows. Bilbo, huddled in a cloak, stood silent on the doorstep beside Frodo. Aragorn sat with his head bowed to his knees. Only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him. The others could only be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. Sam was standing by the pony, sucking his teeth, and staring moodily into the gloom where the river roared stonily below. His desire for adventure was at its lowest ebb. "Bill, my lad," he said, "you oughtn't to have took up with us. You could have stayed here and ate the best hay till the new grass comes." Bill swished his tail and said nothing. Okay. Now, there are several ways. There are several ways in which this is a sort of unusual passage, right? It is not only unusual in the sense that nothing happens. Okay, actually, that's not very unusual. There are many passages in the Lord of the Rings in which nothing happens, but this is a passage which is describing everybody gathered together doing nothing, right? It is, Jackie. It is like staging, essentially, right? This is a transitional. This whole section, right? Ever since the "I Sit Beside the Fire and Think" poem, has been in this transitional moment when they are leaving but have not yet set off on the journey, and it's dragged out quite a bit, right? And this passage seems to me that we got the descriptions, and that didn't seem like it was dragging out. I mean, okay, we're getting descriptions of people, and that's rare enough, right? I mean, Tolkien almost never describes anybody, so what we got there was interesting and noteworthy. But here, it's like action, but action not happening, right? Bilbo, huddled in a cloak, stood silent on the doorstep beside Frodo. That's describing what's happening in the midst of the nothing happening, right? The waiting. And I think this is, Jack, as you said, this is staging. There is a lot of tension, and Almaria, I would add, this is there's a lot of tension here. There's a lot of uncertainty, right? Remember the description of the surroundings, of the atmosphere, right? Of the gloom overhead, and remember the wind seething in the pines, right? And all that stuff, right? There was this darkness and gloom closing in around them. Of course, it was sunset when that was, like, it was evening, right? So it was getting dark. But it was not just that, right? There was sort of more than that. There was this kind of oppressiveness around them. And now, look at the emphasis here. Their farewells had been said in the great hall by the fire. Now it's dark and cold, right? They're not by the fire anymore. But notice what we get. A gleam of firelight came from the open doors, and soft lights were glowing in many windows. So they're outside in the gloom and the cold, but they're looking at, we get a glimpse of the house, the last homely house, and it still looks cheerful, right? The doors are open. The doors of the house are open, and the gleam of firelight is coming from them. The soft lights are glowing in the windows. There is still light and warmth in the last homely house, but it's behind them now, right? And there's Bilbo, who's not leaving, right? Bilbo, who's staying, and Frodo, who's going, are both standing silently on the doorstep with Bilbo huddled in a cloak, right? So this is again, it's this transitional moment. They've neither gone nor are they still there, right? They're outside the door, but Bilbo's come with him on the journey this far, right? As far as the doorstep. And they're still standing together, but they're standing now outside. And outside in the cold. Yeah, exactly, Jackie. That sense of being backlit, I think, is important, actually, in this. Like this image of the two of them. Notice how they're connected to the doorstep, right? They're standing on the doorstep, and the doors are open behind them, right? So there's the open doors of the last homely house with the gleam of firelight coming up, backlighting them, and there's Bilbo and Frodo in the doors, like in the doorway, which is standing open, but they're on the doorstep. They're outside in the dark, but with the light from the house still shining around them. Yeah, it's a very liminal state, Hrothgar. Absolutely. Yeah, Emily, that's interesting. Emily says, even though I know this is nighttime, I've never actually pictured it as dark. Emily, I think I think I read this book dozens of times without ever having the fact that they were leaving after dark register in my brain. I always pictured it as daylight. I mean, I got the description of the seething pines and the gloom and stuff like it. I always pictured it gray, like gloomy and stuff, but I still always kind of pictured it daylight. In my head, I didn't think about it consciously, right? It's only as we've been talking this through that I kind of realized, I had always in my mind's eye, I had always imagined this to be in daylight. No, that was definitely not because of the movies, Jackie. That definitely predated the movies for me. I mean, we get that in the films. And of course, in the films, that's hardly surprising, right? I mean, like they don't like to film things in the dark when they don't have to. If there's not like a really, really strong reason for them to do that. But of course, it's actually a really interesting, though, it's a really interesting illustration, I think, Jackie, of sort of what is happening in an adaptation. Like, if you think about what is it about the scene that they emphasize, right? That the adaptation, like the Peter Jackson films, what do they play on? What is the primary note of the setting out scene, right? And the primary note of the setting out scene in the film is Frodo's discomfort, right? Frodo's supposed to be leading the party, which is silly. I always thought that was a little silly. Like, no one is like, yes, Frodo is the ring bearer and it's his quest, but the whole point was that he had guides, right? The whole idea that Frodo has to like pretend he knows the way to Mordor somehow, I always thought was a little strange. But exactly, Silk Westcott, that his leaning on Gandalf and Gandalf kind of whispering to him, is Mordor right or left, right? And Gandalf sort of whispering it to them. That's the emphasis in that scene. Darkness, gloom, ominousness, that's not what they're focusing on, right? What they focus on is Frodo, this moment for Frodo. This is the moment when Frodo is setting forth, and he is, in a sense, the leader, but he is uncertain, and he doesn't know, he's not confident, and is relying on Gandalf. Like, that's I'm not saying it's a bad scene. It works, and it does some really interesting work within the context of that adaptation. But that's what they focus on, right? That's kind of the story of that scene in the films. Here, here we get, it's very different, right? The darkness and gloom is, I think, the dominant theme. We got the business with the horn blowing, right? But we don't. We've once again come back. It's like this scene and the seething pines paragraph, with all the gloom and darkness closing in around them, seem to me like sort of the kind of frame for this whole transitional, this whole liminal space thing. Anyway. Then notice what we get at the end of the paragraph. Aragorn sat with his head bowed to his knees. Only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him. How is he sitting? Are we actually... Is he sitting like on a bench or on the steps? He can't be like all the way. Yeah, exactly. He can't be all the way fetal position to Juice Man. That's what I'm trying to figure out, right? His head bowed to his knees. I mean, is he doubled over like in the crash position in an airplane? Is that what we have? You imagine him sitting like Elle in Death Note. Drow Snake, probably not. Nobody sits like that. Yeah. My son's been showing me Death Note, so I get that reference. His knees pulled up to his chest makes a good deal more sense. Yeah, if he were sitting on the ground with his knees drawn up and his arms around them cradling his head, Chris, that sounds... Yeah. You see the reason why I'm asking this, though? I'm trying to picture, in giving us this detail, and again, this is unusual. We don't normally get this kind of thing about people in Tolkien. Tolkien does not give us much in the way of stage directions. Some authors do that a lot, right? Some authors are always telling us what gesture characters are making with their hands and what clothes they're wearing and all these other things. Tolkien does not do that much at all. So here that we have Aragorn's posture described in this kind of detail is sufficiently unusual to take a second, because he's told us this for a reason. He doesn't just do this, right? He's told us this for a reason. Why? What is he telling us about Aragorn? He goes on to add some commentary to it. Only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him. So he is, what? Borne down by the weight of this moment, thinking about the weight of this moment. And exactly how we know that his head is bowed to his knees. But of course that could be done in several ways, and it matters, doesn't it? I mean, if he's sitting with his thighs parallel to the ground, right? In order to have his head bowed down to his knees, we have to imagine him all the way forward, right? All the way forward with his head on his knees. Again, like the airplane crash position. And that's a very different posture from sitting on the ground with your knees drawn up and your head resting on them, or even with your forehead against your knees in that kind of a situation. Right? I mean, that strikes me as really a very different thing. Yeah, Ray, I agree. It does sound like Aragorn is taking the proverbial deep breath here before undertaking the greatest quest of his life. This is the turning point of Aragorn's career. He's had a long career already, right? You think of the things, well, think ahead to the things we shall later discover that Aragorn has done, right? How about that sentence? But he's yeah. Several of you are referring to Arwen. On the one hand, I do think Arwen is involved in this hour. Yes. The only Elrond knew, because others know what this hour means to him in as much as the kingship is concerned, right? His sort of royal destiny or whatever. But yeah, I'm resistant to the idea that he's just sad about leaving Arwen, because as Tarloniel says, that's been the norm, ever since he's known her, right? I mean, the times that he's spent with her, the times he's seen her, that's always been the exception. And now maybe he's gone through this every time, but I don't know. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I like that. C. Schwab just provided a picture of a guy who is sitting. How did you find that? That's really good. Anyway, okay, so he's it's a guy who's sitting on a bench with his thighs parallel to the ground. But his feet are spread out, and his elbows are on his knees, and his head is hanging down to his hands, which are near the level of his knees. But his head is bowed way forward. So his back is not all the way down. His back is arched down. It's more of a hanging his head. Like that, in that case, he's hanging his head. And Corey, that's exactly why I'm so interested in this, right? Is he hanging his head? Is that what's happening here? Is this a moment of like meditation or prayer for Aragorn? Or is there some sense in which in this moment, is he going through like temptation of some kind? Like, is there a chance Aragorn is going to be overwhelmed by this moment in some way? I don't know. Yeah. I'm not sure he's hanging his head. It's the head hanging part of that I have the hardest time with. I don't think he's depressed here. I think that he is... Here's one of the reasons I don't think that. I think that we have seen a moment that anticipates this earlier on. And the moment that I'm thinking about, is when he is on Weathertop. When he is on Weathertop and he's remembering Elendil. Remember that moment when he's like, this is the place where Elendil stood to await the coming of Gil-galad, right? He was conscious of the fact that he was walking in the footsteps of Elendil, right? Not just like he's always done as the heir of Elendil, and he's known he's the heir of Elendil for decades now, right? Not just in that sense, but the time of the crisis, like the War of the Last Alliance, the parallel to the War of the Last Alliance is coming. I need to play the part of Elendil in the War of the Last Alliance. He knows this. He signs up for this explicitly at the council, right? He's prepared for that. He knows that's the direction that he's heading in, right? And remember, he had connected the idea of the reforging of the sword with the finding of the ring. So again, he knows it's coming. Good. JJ's quoting the passage where the hobbits are discovering that Strider, of course, is learned in old lore, and Merry asks him who is Gil-galad, but it's before he says any, it's when Sam says his poetic answer. But Strider did not answer and seemed to be lost in thought, right? Yeah, that's the moment. It's pretty heavy, but on the other hand, I don't get the impression that he's sad about it, that he's sad or depressed. Like, I don't think there's that kind of it's a big deal. He knows it's a big deal. There are things to be concerned about. There's a lot of weight on him, and we will see Aragorn under stress. Aragorn is going to be under significant stress at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring and the beginning of the Two Towers. I think that's Aragorn's lowest point, honestly. Parthgalen and the death of Boromir will put Aragorn the closest he's ever going to get to losing it. But I don't think he's depressed now. I don't think the prospect of following in Elendil's footstep depresses him or saddens him. I think he's ready for sacrifice. if that's needed. I don't think I certainly don't get a Peter Jackson-esque, like, this role is too big for me. I'm, contemplating whether or not to turn from that path, or something like that. I don't see that either. Yeah. Maybe it works. Okay, so Matt has posted a picture of Aragorn in the film sitting, what is that, Helm's Deep? Is that where he's sitting there? But anyway, he's sitting on steps. And so he's sitting on a step, so his feet are lower than his butt, but not very much. So his knees stick up quite a bit. His head isn't bowed to them, but if he were to bow to his head to his knees there, he wouldn't have to bow all the way forward like he would if he were sitting on a bench that way. Yeah. Okay, yeah, it is Helm's Deep. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree that he's taking a deep breath. That is probably true. And I agree, Wob, it is an emotional step. It's one thing to plan. It's one thing to be aware of it. It's one thing to even think that you're ready to go but actually to take the first step. I mean, it's real. This has to be an incredibly surreal moment for Aragorn, right? I mean, the fact that he's known this is coming doesn't make it less strange, right? I mean, in every way. Not just the great roll of the dice as far as, his relationship with Arwen is concerned, but generations and generations, of his ancestors. Like, for this was like Valandil spared, right? Left behind in Rivendell. For this was Arvedui, rescued. For this was, like all these things, right? This is the entire history of the northern line of the Dunedain has culminated tonight, right? And this is the time when it moves forward. Yeah, JJ, I agree. It's an interesting thing between the on the one hand, this is a familiar thing. Like we were talking about already, how he's been away from Arwen lots of times. Like, he's left Arwen behind lots of times, right? One place and another. He's been parted from Arwen many, many times. But there's a difference between this time leaving Rivendell, which he's left Rivendell probably by night, probably many times, right? And yet, the day is here. It's like those times, but it's very different from those times. And yes, Ray, I don't want to underplay. I agree that the Arwen angle is important, but I agree with you in not wanting to lose sight of the fact that for his own personal, and political destiny, this is a huge moment. This is the moment right here, is the moment when he moves from being the heir of Elendil to Aragorn, the uncrowned king. He and Boromir are setting out for Minas Tirith. It's happening. It's happening. He is going to Minas Tirith with Boromir in order to reveal himself as the heir of Elendil. He's claimed it, right? He stated it. He had his coming out party there at the council, right? He was announced, attested by Elrond, who knew Valandil, right, way back when. So the public declaration of his identity and his purpose has happened. The call, right, through the dream the summons has been received and is being, he is responding to that. He's being faithful in his response to that. It's a big deal. This is a very big. It is a solemn moment, Alyssa, as Thorin would say. Yes. By the way, notice how Tolkien is really good at saying less. And I think, by the way, this is a really great creative writing lesson. Not that I hold Tolkien up as necessarily a creative writing model that modern writers will want to emulate all the time, because there are lots of things that I would not suggest necessarily emulating about Tolkien as a creative writer. But one of the things that you can clearly see when you look at the history of The Hobbit and the history of The Lord of the Rings, his tales grow in the telling, but they always get shorter when they're revised, almost always. His first drafts, yeah, exactly. JJ says, Tolkien creative writing tip, never finish anything. That's one of the ways in which I would not recommend him as a model. But anyway, Tolkien almost always cuts down. When you read the first draft of something, most of the time, it contains a lot more explanation, a lot more stuff. It's just spelled out. He spells everything out much more the first time through. And then as he revises, he trims it down and he cuts things out. And this is why, by the way, it's very difficult sometimes to know whether or not when he's removed something from an earlier draft, it's no longer there in the final draft. Does that mean he took it out? Like, does that mean like he no longer means that thing, that he cut that concept? Or did he just cut the sentence that describes it, right? In any case, this is a classic example, right? Notice what he does not do in this passage, in this sentence. He doesn't tell us what this hour meant to Aragorn. He actually tells us nothing about what this hour meant to Aragorn. All he tells us is that only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him, whatever that was, right? But he leaves us to imagine what this hour meant to him. And there are so many different ways to think about that, right? Think about his family and his family traditions and the burden that's falling on his shoulders here, the excitement. The day has come, right? The day when when the Dunedain of the North come out of the shadows, right? When he puts off the rascally demeanor and becomes king again. That's a big deal, right? That's a big deal. With Arwen, right? The reference to her father does suggest, right? That this is a big deal on that level as well, right? That it is emotionally a big deal because now he has come to the final test, right? Where either, their hope will be fulfilled or all hopes shall fail. I wonder if he's thinking about his mother. I too, Valori, wonder that. And by the way, that's one of my favorite added scenes in the Peter Jackson film. I love the Gilrain's tombstone scene in the extended film. That was a brilliant touch, because I wonder that too, if he's thinking about that. Anyway, now, Matt, I don't know how our narrator knows that only Elrond knows fully what this hour meant to him. I don't know. I think Drow Snake, I agree. I think that our narrator is venturing a guess here, right? I suspect that our narrator, whom I believe to be Frodo in this moment, I believe that the Frodo narrator is pointing vaguely at the Arwen situation, right? He is hinting ahead at what shall be later on. And by the way, by invoking Elrond, notice what he also achieves indirectly. What does this hour mean to Elrond? This is a big deal. It's a huge deal to Elrond himself, right? I mean, yeah, there's a lot on Aragorn here as he's prepared to set out. What's Elrond thinking? Watching him set out, right? Yeah, I think that's, definitely another thing to think about. Extreme victory or ultimate loss, or both in Elrond's case, right? Absolute defeat or ultimate loss, of course, is Elrond's choice, right? Essentially. It's agreed, Silk Westgate. Totally a lose-lose for Elrond, which is a picture of the lose-lose for the elves as a whole. Galadriel is going to say a similar thing fairly soon, relatively soon, that either Sauron's going to get the ring and they'll all be hosed, or the ring's going to be destroyed and then they'll be more gently hosed, right? I mean, like, that's, there's no great win for Elrond nor for any of the elves in a sense here, Jack. I mean, they're committed, right? They're committed to the defeat of Sauron. That'll be good, right? That's worth it, but it's going to come come at a cost. This is exactly. Therefore, to Elrond, all chances of the War of the Ring would bring grief. That's exactly right, Jackie. That's exactly it. And yes, that's also very true, Aranos, that we have to remember that Elrond is Aragorn's foster father, right? I mean, he has known and loved Elrond his entire life. Elrond has taken him in and fostered him like his own son. So losing Elrond is going to be a big deal for him, and even Elrond's own, knowing that his joy would be the instrument of Elrond's grief, right? I mean, man, it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal. Anyway, yeah. And no, Elrond hasn't sent him to get a Silmaril, Chris. But there is a parallel, right? There is a parallel. Now, Elrond is well aware of the parallel, right? He's not pulled a Thingol here. And yet, he knows that... that's I think maybe a conversation for another time. But that's a really fun parallel. The parallel between Thingol and the quest of the Silmaril, and Elrond's father-in-law requirement to Aragorn. Right, he's sending Frodo to get the Silmaril on Aragorn's behalf. Something like that, right? Though again, there it's losing something, not gaining something. There are lots of there are anti-parallels as well as parallels. Again, Elrond is not unknowingly putting himself in the same position that Thingol did, right? He avoids the mistake that Thingol brought destruction down upon himself particularly, and his kingdom as a whole, by bringing the curse home to himself, right? By through his own choices. Elrond isn't doing that, and yet the consequences for him are pretty extreme. For Dauntless is wondering if this is part of the reason why Elrond did not advise who should take up the quest. Well, when we do think about the because he didn't want to be Thingol, right? He's not going to send anybody. He's not going to assign anyone, dare anyone, put anybody in that kind of position. Yeah, in some ways. Certainly it is, I don't know if he's doing that in order to distance himself from Thingol, but it certainly does emphasize the distance between what he did, right? The position he was. Again, he's well aware of the precedent there. Nobody knows better than Elrond. Nobody living in Middle Earth knows better than Elrond the extent to which the parallels apply, right? Remember Arwen's response when Aragorn says, "I thought you were Tinuviel," right? And she says, "Yeah, I get that a lot," right? The parallel's not lost on her dad either. But Ray, I agree. It does mean that the parallel to Huon is Bill the Pony. No, the parallels don't go quite that far. No, they don't. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Right. Anyway, we're glancing indirectly at what this hour meant to Elrond himself, right? But again, just notice how indirect it is. Only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him. We get a description of his posture and a statement that nobody except Elrond knows fully what this hour means to Aragorn, right? And then he just lets the reader imagine, project, right? What is Aragorn going through? And even, as I said, even the description of his posture is a little bit ambivalent, right? I kind of like that. I kind of like the, I'm not sitting on the ground. I'm sitting maybe on a step, and my knees are higher. My thighs are not quite parallel to the ground, right? They're a little out of parallel. My knees are up, right? So that he can rest his head forward. He's bowing his head in an attitude that is more like prayer or meditation than it is like despair or depression. Yeah, I agree. The answer is all the above, Almaria. Yeah, definitely. Yes, and Chris, of course, you are right to remind us exactly how long Aragorn's shanks are, right? So that his knees would be relatively high up towards his head, unless the step was a very deep step indeed, right? So, yeah. Now, where's the sword? I think several people are worried about the sword. I don't know, but I think you can sit on steps with a sword at your hip. Usually, you can get it out of the way. You can angle it up. I mean, you got to take care of that before you sit. You can just plop, right? You gotta organize yourself there before you sit down. But usually that can happen. Yeah. So we'll see. Yeah, maybe we could do a Mythmoot reenactment of Aragorn sitting on the steps. Yeah. Maybe we should do a thorough butt cheek reenactment, right? Let's do the Aragorn sitting and the Gandalf sitting on the window, and yeah, exactly, sitting in their various ways, right? Right, yes. The Fellowship of the Ring, the Fellowship of the Ring, buttocks compilation is that's it. Frodo's cushions, absolutely, yeah. We kind of got but we didn't get to the scattering of the cushions. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it. Maybe that's what we should do. We'll see. Okay, cool. All right. The second paragraph, which is very short. One sentence. The others could be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. Why is this its own paragraph? I have to admit, it's been a while since I've studied The Lord of the Rings in print. That is, I normally read The Lord of the Rings in audio form. I had forgotten that doesn't sound like a different paragraph. Right, if we could just go back a few sentences. Bilbo, huddled in a cloak, stood silent on the doorstep beside Frodo. Aragorn sat with his head bowed to his knees. Only Elrond knew fully what this hour meant to him. The others could be seen as grey shapes in the darkness. Sam was standing by the pony. That clearly sounds like a new paragraph, right? You can hear the new paragraph at Sam was standing by the pony, right? The others could be seen as grey shapes in the darkness. Does not sound like a new paragraph, right? Why do you think it is? Why do you think it is? We do get a tableau here. And Trifle, I agree. It is really interesting that we get the narrative points out that we can't see folks, and Gandalf isn't even here when we just got descriptions of all of them. Yeah, including Gandalf, right? Now, meanwhile, Gandalf's not even here. Now, it's conceivable, Trifle, that we, where they said farewell in the Great Hall by the fire, but so that almost works for me as a dodge for this. That like the descriptions came when everyone was standing around the fire, and we can see folks clearly indoors, and before we go out into the gloom, and then they go out into the gloom. But surely, Boromir didn't sound his horn inside, right? Surely that didn't happen. All right, hang on a second. I gotta check. I'm gonna look this up in my paper copy. Some people are saying it's not a separate paragraph in theirs. The paragraphing I have here is from the ebook version. But let's see. Where are we? Okay, I sit beside the fire and think. Bill, my lad. Okay. Okay, yeah. It's not in this print edition either. Okay. You think Gandalf and Elrond went back inside? Maybe. Like Leobot? Maybe. Right, I agree. Miraculous trash. Like, being like good house guest rule number 1, you don't blow your horn inside, right? I mean, Boromir wouldn't do that. I absolutely refuse to believe that Boromir would blow his horn inside. Absolutely no way. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that wouldn't be funny, because I think it would be funny. But yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Okay, so maybe it's not its own paragraph. But in any case, the others could be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. Who are the others? Everybody but Aragorn, Frodo, Bilbo, and absent Gandalf, right? What does it make you think of? What does it make you think of? The others could only be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. We've gotten that before. I never made this connection until like literally just before I started class. I was looking at this, I was like, holy cow. Yeah, the ring wraiths. And not just the ring wraiths. But yeah, exactly, Drowsnake. Frodo, after he was stabbed, his friends looking like gray shapes. Gray shapes was exactly, I think that phrase was even used before he, before the ford, in those last days before the ford, when he was going deeper and deeper towards the other side. That was a bad sign when his friends could only be seen as gray shapes in the darkness before, right? And now we get that again. There's Frodo, and there's Bilbo standing with him, and there's Aragorn sitting nearby with his head bowed to his knees, and the others can only be seen as gray I added the word only there, right? The others could be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. That's the only thing we get of everybody else, right? There's this distance. The isolation was one of the things that we saw, the distance between himself and the others. Remember that sense of distance. We get the distance when he cries out on Weathertop, when he's wearing the ring, right? When Sam reports to him after he awakes what happened, what he saw, right? Sam only saw some vague shadowy shapes, right? He didn't see much very clearly. And then he heard Frodo speak, and it sounded like Frodo was speaking from far away or from under the ground. Remember? While he was wearing the ring. So when he was on the other side, he was right there next to Sam, but there was this distance, this remoteness, right? This disconnection between him and his friends. And that's been a theme, hasn't it? I mean, when Frodo is briefly submitting to the temptation of the ring in the house of Tom Bombadil, what does he do? He starts to leave. When he is being subjected to the temptation from the ring in the barrow, he is tempted to leave, right? Okay, maybe it's not that phrase. Look up, JJ, look up again in the text, just the word gray, maybe? I'm sure you can find the sentence. I know it's there. I know I'm not crazy. I know there was a reference to Frodo looking at only being able to see gray shapes. If it might not use that phrase. No, not at the ford, JJ. Not the shadowy forms waving flames. That's not the one I mean. It's before that, a little bit before that. When he's riding and he's looking at his friends, a shadow came between him and his friends. Okay, that might be the one that I'm thinking of. I'm sure there's a reference to grayness. I'm going totally crazy if there's not a reference to grayness. I feel like I remember that really clearly, but obviously not clearly enough to be able to quote it. Okay, during the day, things about him faded to shadows of ghostly gray. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of, JJ. He almost welcomed the coming of night, for then the world seemed less pale and empty. Okay, ghostly gray. Maybe that's the reference that I was thinking of in particular. The others could be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. Now, obviously, there's nothing that sketchy happening here, right? It's just dark. Like, you can't see them very clearly. But the sense of isolation, right? There's nobody else. There's Frodo. There's Bilbo standing with him. And there's Aragorn sitting nearby with his head bowed to his knees. And the others are just gray shapes in the darkness. He felt the shadows coming between him and the faces of his friends. I think I'm combining those two in my head, but it's that same section. It's both of those are descriptions of his experience of losing himself, right, in the Wraith world through his wound. So this does feel to me like a brief recollection of that, right? That seems to me the place, like sort of the emotional place where Frodo is in this moment, that he feels alone or almost alone in a way which is reminding him of that time in those last days leading up to the ford. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure this is those passages are the ones I'm thinking of, Matt. And of course, Frodo this is one of the things that Frodo has been. It's been an issue with Frodo all along, one way and another, right? Loneliness, being cut off from everybody. His first reaction when he found out about the ring was that he should leave everything behind, right? Even if it meant going off into exile, right? That he would end in exile. He would be separated from everything and everyone. And then, of course, we have his reluctance to take his friends with him into danger, right? Leading up to the conspiracy and everything else, right? His resistance against taking anybody along with him. And, of course, that's going to be recapitulated again at Parthgallen. Like, that's not over, right? So on the one hand, you have in Frodo this impulse from the beginning that has said, don't imperil anybody else. If you are taking this up, take it on yourself alone and try to preserve other people. Don't drag anybody else in this along with you. But at the same time, in parallel, there's been this really bad isolation that we've seen, right? The Ring's attempt, it seems, to kind of cut him away from the herd, right? Separate yourself from your friends. Go off by yourself. Presumably, from the Ring's perspective, where I can work on you in private, like I did that Smeagol chap. Anyway, this, and then of course we have the shadow that comes between him and his friends is the most dramatic example of that, right? He does cut himself away from the herd on Weathertop, right? Or the Dell under Weathertop, when he puts on the ring. Then he is in trouble, right? And that ends up separating him from his friends. And yeah, like it almost convinced Frodo to do in Tom's Cabin, Bjarna's Honor. Exactly. So this, and then of course in the council, we have Sam's concern, right? Sam's concern that Frodo was going to be sent alone. Surely you won't send him off alone, right? Will you? Sam's commitment has been, at the end of the day, Sam's number one job simply has been not to let Frodo be alone, right? Not to let him sacrifice himself in that way, because he's going to need help. It's going to be wrong for Frodo to go off completely alone. And we have Sam's repeated conviction of this, right? His original charge from Gandalf after the Infenestration, his reaffirmed commitment with the elves, right? And that he tells Frodo about the morning after the elves. Of course, you've got the conspiracy. And then, again, we'll see it at Parthgallen. And then, of course, at the end of the Council of Elrond, once again. And then we'll see it at Parthgallen as well. Yeah, anyway. So Frodo's isolation, Frodo being isolated, or cut off or separated, is, I think, a pretty significant theme, or sort of motif throughout the entire book, and I think we see it again in this moment here. Is it a reflection of his fears? Right? Nobody, from where he's standing, nobody's really with him. Or rather, there are only two who are with him. There's Bilbo, whom he's leaving behind, and there's Aragorn, who's wrapped up in his own concerns, right? Because this is a big moment. Frodo knows enough about what this hour means to Aragorn to know that this is a big deal, and to know that he doesn't know fully what this hour means to him, right? Yeah, yeah. And there's Frodo, right? And the others can only be seen as gray shapes in the darkness. I think we do perhaps get an insight into Frodo's mindset, Frodo's fears. Here before they depart. Yeah, Kurtzimus. We'll see. Is Frodo's departure at Parthgalen right? That's an interesting question. We'll have to talk about that in a little while. Yeah. Anyway, we'll get there. JJ, I agree. It is never right for Frodo to try to leave Sam behind. That's one of the main reasons I think it's pretty clear Frodo's decision on Parthgalen is wrong, at least partly wrong, right? It's never okay to leave Sam behind. And that was his intention, right? He chides Sam again for not being left behind. And it shows. I do not believe Frodo made the right decision at Parthgalen. Yeah. Anyway, but we have a lot to talk about between now and then. Okay. Meanwhile, what's Sam up to? Standing by the pony, sucking his teeth. Do we have time to talk about tooth sucking? I'm not sure I properly picture this. What is he doing? How does one suck one's teeth in this way? I feel like this is an idiom I've never fully gotten. Right. Yes, I do assume he's sucking his own teeth. Right. I mean, sometimes I've heard like the sound, like the tisk tisk sound being described as a tooth sucking sound. Is that what he's doing? Is he like, but he's just standing there sucking his teeth, staring moodily around. So that's it? Okay. So why? Is he just like repeatedly? Is that what he's doing? Yeah, I don't. The longer, the more annoyed version. I get. There's only so annoyed I can do that sound. Maybe I just don't do it right. You can draw the sound out speculatively. Really? Maybe I need to put this on my life goal list. You can draw tooth sucking, speculative, drawn out tooth sucking. Clearly, I need a reenactment of this. I need some instruction on how to do this, because I don't really know how to do that. Yeah, I've always been puzzled by that. I've always understood the tooth sucking as the tisk tisk, right? I've always gotten that, but yeah, I don't. Okay, contemplatively, it would seem to match with staring moodily into the gloom. By the way, I I can't. I think of the Old English mode with moody. I don't think it's what it means here. I don't think he's not in like an overmode situation there. But anyway, he's staring moodily into the gloom where the river roared stonily below. His desire for adventure was at its lowest ebb. The use of the tidal metaphor, lowest ebb, in describing his desire for adventure, when combined with the river roaring stonily, is really interesting, right? I mean, we get those two things kind of combining together. We get Sam's, the gloom around him, and the stony, the roaring stonily, is external atmospheric cues which are echoing Sam's internal moodiness, it would seem, and the low ebb of his desire for adventure. By the way, yes, stonily, I've only ever heard stonily used as an adverb in one other place that I can think of, and that is in the one of Tolkien's poems, in the original of the Merry Messenger poem. Why can I not? What's the title of that in The Adventures of Tom Bombadil? Errantry. Phew. I couldn't think of the title. Errantry. Yeah, in the Errantry poem, the rivers flow stonily in that poem as well. Yeah, I do need a nap, Hrothgar. I think that's exactly true. Yes. And it's a wonderful, it's part of, it's one of his, as I recall, it's one of the internal trisyllable rhymes in Errantry. But it was awesome when he did it there, and I'm sure that he's thinking of that, which is kind of funny because it's a very different situation. I'm looking, where did my copy of The Adventures of Tom Bombadil go? Bet you I can find it, because I'm pretty sure he uses it in a similar sort of sense there. Okay, here we go. There it is. Yes. He called the winds of Argosies with cargoes in to carry him across the rivers 17 that lay between to tarry him. He landed all in loneliness, where stonily the pebbles on the running river Derelin goes merrily forever on. So you've got the contrast between the running river Derelin is merrily goes merrily forever on, but he is landed all in loneliness, and stonily rhymes with loneliness, right? So you've got the loneliness and stonily connection there. So he is lonely, and the merriness of the river chattering over the stones contrasts with his own perspective here. Yeah, there it is. The river roared. This river is roaring stonily, which is a little different. And here we have moodily and stonily. Yeah, I agree. It is almost a callback. Moodily is an unusual enough adverbial form, right? That when you get stonily, an even more unusual adverbial form, a much more unusually, much more unusual adverbial form. It really does call attention to it, doesn't it? Yeah. His desire for adventure was at its lowest ebb. And again, with the loneliness and stonily, of course, I'm still thinking about what seems to be Frodo's perspective in the previous paragraph. Sam's not lonely, right? He's staring moodily as the river roars stonily, and his desire is at its lowest ebb. He is feeling least desirous of adventure. He doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to leave. There is nothing in Sam that makes him want to go right now. Sam is pleasing no private interest in going. The departure from Rivendell is a pure act of self-sacrifice on Sam's part, right? He did have a desire. Exactly, Aspen. It was to see elves, right? You take me to see the elves? And now he's leaving the elves, right? And he's not leaving the elves in order to go home. He's leaving the elves. To follow Frodo into the adventure that he has no desire for. And he's staring moodily, sucking his teeth, however exactly he does that, with his low desire. Exactly. Sam's original purpose is complete. Everything else is duty. Exactly. His duty calls him to go on, and he's doing so, right? Without flinching, I don't think. Yeah. And Jackie, I think that that's right. Even the Tra-la-la-lolly river has become cold and dreary. This is the same river that was flowing in the Tra-la-la-lolly song, right? Stonily is a wonderful adverb which evokes the roaring of a fast-flowing river on the stones. But of course, if the river is roaring stonily, it's like comparing its movement to it makes the river itself sound cold and emotionless. It's not a cheerful sound. Not, it would seem, in this content, in this context. I still hold that this is Frodo. I don't think this is Sam narrating. I don't think that this is a Sam interruption narrating. I think there's in my mind, there's a really simple index here. And that is, if Sam is the protagonist, it's definitely not Sam narrating. I don't think that Sam is ever glorifying himself or thinks that what he was doing. I think that Sam himself would think that him standing by the pony sucking his teeth and staring moodily into the gloom is not important enough to put into the story. But I think that Frodo does. This paragraph highlights Sam's determination, despite his feelings, despite his inclinations, despite his desires. He's going to do his duty and move forward. And then we're going to get his words. Right? Then we're going to get his words, which I think is definitely Frodo. Again. Now, Spielkalb, I don't think that I disagree with you. Well, I think I would only disagree. So he said he left his desire to seeing elves behind in the meeting with Gildor. After that, he felt his higher purpose. That's not only duty for him, much more. I don't think I disagree with you there, other than perhaps I think I'm using the word duty in a different sense. I'm using the word duty in a high sense. Like what you're calling much more than duty, I'm calling duty, basically. I just mean the thing that he feels he has to do. Like that high purpose, right? I would use the word duty to describe that. Maybe it's not the best way, but I am definitely including that when I am talking about his duty. Now I agree, Kurtzimus, that Sam is not gonna lose touch with wonder. His relation, his sight of Oliphants, right, is going to show us that. But it's not like he's going forward for the sake of Oliphants, right? It's not, it's not to see elves or dragons or Oliphants that he's going forward at this point. It's his duty. He's got a job to do, right? See, this is why Spielkalb, I come back to the word duty, right? Because it's like Sam's language, right? Sam's language is, I've got a job to do, right? It is a high purpose, right? It is much, much more than simply an occupation, right? Or something like that. But it's still duty. It's still definitely duty. In the sense that he's got a job to do, right? That's how he talks about it. That's his language. Okay, it's late, and I'm keeping you late, so I shouldn't keep you much longer. We will transition next time out of this. So we did not get through 2 slides. Indeed, we got through slightly less than 1, but we will return next time to get Bill the Pony's contribution to this conversation, and then we will move forward into more Sam talk next time, with Sam's horrible moment of realization, right? When the recognition of his failure is going to come crashing down upon him next week. So, all right. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. I will see you guys next week. Text Moot this weekend, but I should be back in time to be able to do class next week. So we will look forward to seeing you there. And in the meantime, we'll do our field trip. All right.
Good evening.
Good evening, Valari. How are you?
I am doing all right.
Good. We're gonna
head
back to the angle, right?
Yay! Exactly.
Right.
Huzzah! That's right.
Huzzah! Back to Gaerond, where we got the milestone last time.
Yep. Let's see. Oh, I'm still adding people. Hang on. Be along shortly.
Okay. All right. I'm sitting next to Narnian here. Okay.
Yeah. So the other Narnian.
Yes.
So my 2 cents on that, on this last passage, especially with in regards to Aragorn, is that it is so strange that Tolkien has stuck us with a narrator who is not at all just. I mean, Frodo is a very romantic, florid, flowery person. We've seen this multiple times, especially when he's waxing poetic about Goldberry. But when it comes to like romantic love, he just seems to either he doesn't get it, or he's just too hobbity to think it's appropriate to discuss.
Yeah, well, the whole narrative, is certainly has a very distant relationship with that whole question, right? Mm-hmm. We're gonna get some romance stuff, but it's gonna be
it's just such a far cry from like the Baron and Luthien romance that was alluded to earlier by Strider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Right. Yeah. Almaria says, I feel like he just doesn't find it his story to tell. Something like that. Yeah. I mean,
like I said, either that or it's just something that hobbits don't discuss. Because
possibly.
I mean, as far as we know, we don't really have much evidence of any hobbit love stories happening.
Other than the extremely low low detail with Sam and Rosie, right? I mean,
well,
and there certainly is
the number of
reluctance to
issues is the
discuss it.
closest thing we have to anything in regards to that. But even that, it's like we're told about everything after the fact, and it's just one of those, and so. It's like it was more important to state that they were legally bound at that point. You know, it's like it was just I don't know. It's like for the sake of listing the 13 some odd children, it was more important to state that they had a legal marriage rather than there was any sort of great romance between Sam and Rosie.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sam talks about it. I mean, I think that Sam does clearly hint at that. I think that, like, you could tell a different story, you know, that would be the romance of Sam and Rosie. But I think Sam tells us enough to suggest that happened. But I'm thinking of it as evidence in support of what you're describing, like a hobbitish reticence to discuss it, right?
Yes.
When he talks about it, he's very indirect and doesn't even finish his sentence.
Yeah, like he's too embarrassed to finish.
Yeah.
So British.
Yes. And he's very indirect about Aragorn and Arwen.
Yes.
And what they feel and everything.
Well, with Sam and Frodo, that's two gentlemen talking. They're having a conversation in that one, and it, you know, for the longest time there have been rules about talking about women when when the woman in question is not present. It's considered, rude. But in this case, where we're chronicling one of the greatest love affairs of this age, we get he was thinking about stuff and only he knew what it was. It's like, that's right. It. That's all we got for this great, fantastic moment, this beautiful bridge into the greatest love story of his life. Historic, prophetic, beautiful love story. And he was thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't ask him what it was.
Let's run off to the south while we talk, because we're going to lose daylight here. So.
Yep. Burning daylight.
Let's go up to the thing. But yeah.
I know nowadays we don't talk about king and queens making out, but like back then we didn't, but like nowadays they would have been plastered on every tabloid.
Right. Well, the point is that the point that you're making is that basically the great love story is very much downplayed as a love story.
Yes. We don't even know it is a love story until later. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. We've received very little information yet about this. Anyway, who's
this nervous-looking fellow?
Yeah, who is this guy?
Mervellan.
Is he a human?
His ears are covered up.
His ears are covered up, but he's got crow's feet and gray hair.
But Mervellan doesn't sound like your typical human name that we've heard. It's not a Breland name anyway.
What does he say? Oh, he's a ranger.
That would get it.
Okay.
Yeah, human face, ranger name. Got it.
Okay. He does look a bit rascally. Looks like he looks like
the territory.
Yeah, he's like ranger lumberjack.
Go make us pancakes.
Basically, yeah. I don't know how fair he feels, but I think he looks relatively foul.
He's fair in the sense that he has light-colored hair.
Well, yes, that's true. Sorry, I'm trying to look at this thing on his forehead, the round badge on his hat.
Yeah.
What is up with that?
It's like
it's got a design. It's not very clear.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out whether there's a flower or what.
Yeah, I can't really get a good gander at it.
Yeah. Okay. So, orcs have taken this over, huh? That's inconvenient.
Yeah. Like they do.
So this looks like a version of the wall that we were seeing.
Uh-huh.
But this is supposed to be a fortress, and they made a big old open door like that right next to the other big old open door?
Well, I've seen doors like that in Gondor. They managed to close them up.
Well, sure, but where are the doors?
Yeah, This is definitely an airy sort of place here.
Okay. Let's see, sorry, I was frozen there for a second. Okay. What's this thing that's... so on the... What direction am I facing? On the east side, over behind where the people are fighting the orcs right now. So up over here. That thing that's fallen. Is that like a spire? Was that a pillar? Yeah, look, there's another one up there on top of the wall. Down here. I've got too much foliage. What's going on here? Look, up there. Yes, up there.
Need to get my bearings here. Nope. Follow the green dots.
Yeah, it looks like a spire of some kind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a few more of them over there. So we've got these...
fluted spires.
Yeah, how did that work? We've got these big arches.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've got the round pillar with the gold sort of overlapping work up the side. Mm-hmm. And that clearly was a pillar that met on the other side of the arch here with that side. And then we have another one in there. So this... It was all very fancy, not very defensible, but what were those spires up to? And I do think we saw this elsewhere, but I think that little sharp stub of the pillar that rises above the arch, that looks like that's intentional. I think that's not broken off because we can see the other two as well with the same thing. What looks like a little asparagus spearhead.
Yep.
Right? Behind the arch. Mm-hmm. That looks like a deliberate design feature.
Interesting.
Yeah, okay. And so was it connected? Was this like a covered courtyard in front of this gate?
Yeah, maybe.
And what were those spires then doing? Those sort of fluted square spires with the green.
Maybe there was supposed to be some sort of plant life, like some sort of organic link that would have since rotted away.
Maybe.
Like maybe creeping vines or something, or...
The walls
something of that nature.
Reasonably thick, and I'm willing to believe that there used to be gates in here, though there's no evidence of it, but, maybe it's just gone.
Beautiful green lines on the floor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe like once all the fortifications were broken into, maybe they salvaged what they could and took it to Rivendell.
Maybe.
I mean,
love how the orcs have erected some spiky things and hanging ropes. I guess they're just waiting to suspend, they've yet collected an insufficient number of bones to finish their decorating.
Well, I think they got plenty of bones. They just need to sit down and do it. It's like scrapbooking. You buy all the supplies and it sits in the basement.
No, that's true. Look, there are bones all over the place. You're right.
There's bones everywhere. Right. Look at this.
Yeah, that's true. They probably had these bones here, and they're like, "Oh, we should leave here because we'll total." Oh, they got whole piles of bones standing over here.
Yeah, I know. It's like we should throw these out. They're attracting rats. No. I'm gonna make something. I promise. Don't touch them. They're exactly where they're supposed to be.
Exactly right. We've got they've got big internal decorating plans here.
Yeah, it's me with my yarn collection, I swear to God. No, don't throw away that brown. I know it's the same as all the other browns, but don't touch it. I need it.
Yep.
There's some runes on these spiky things.
Oh, spiky thing runes. Okay.
Oh, yeah, there are.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, look, there it is. Huh.
This one's better lit. Oh, yeah, the one over here is really well lit. Those are dwarven runes.
They
That
are.
does go with our theory that they pillaged some of these things from the dwarves and then used them themselves.
Yeah. That's really interesting. We haven't seen that on any other spiky thing.
No,
Right,
we've just seen spiky things before.
Yeah. Right, and we were wondering whether or not the spiky things could have been recycled or stolen.
Maybe from dour hands. Or stout axes.
And here, what do they have? This huge pile of ironwork, and they're like, tent, I guess? Put up some canvas over this and call it a day?
For want of a better word, it's a tent, I guess. It doesn't look like it'd actually do much. The whole point of a tent is not to poke holes in it.
Right, well.
But, yeah, I suppose if the sun comes up and there's no ceiling.
Oh, right, and then here's the orc crates of food with the snakes on a stick and the, like, worms and whatever intestines, crate of intestines and
Weevils, fungus.
weevils. Yeah, exactly. Just like we had the carrots and radishes and artichokes out there in the ranger camp.
Yep.
Okay, so clearly these spires, one of which I just fell off of.
Wow, I can get pretty far.
They're clearly a hazard. Whatever else they were intended to be. Hang on, now I'm stuck behind the pile of.
Well, certainly a security hazard. Look how well I can get up here.
That's true.
Just saying, invade me while I'm not looking.
Right, so look, there's more of them behind. All right, hang on a second. I don't want to look at this wall, at this face from further away. So let me come over by this orc archer chap and then look up. Okay. All right. What am I seeing? I'm seeing a wall with a very elaborate doorway. One of these tall, peaked arches. Very tall.
Yeah. It's an extreme angle, but it seems to be near like a watch window or an archery window. Like, are we to understand that they're running up these, like green ramps or something like that? Like Tony Hawk?
Well, I doubt it. Okay, all right, hang on now. Around the wall. Hang on, I got things disrupting me here. Okay, around the wall. So we've got that gold detail work set into the stone like we've seen in several places. Then up at the top, it's the top that I'm trying to figure out.
I know.
And I think JJ's right. I think, JJ, you were mentioning before that you didn't see any evidence of a roof anywhere. And I'm having a hard time seeing it either.
Yeah, that's that Gondorian hubris.
Maybe that's...
Gondolinian.
Maybe that's Noldor all over, right? I
mean,
we haven't seen much in the way of roofs in any of their party structures. Why should they put roofs on their fortifications?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, unless you have things actually descending to you from the sky, which, why should they worry about that?
It's not like there's things that can fly that are bad.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the bad guys have no air force for a long time. But yeah, okay. So they don't... Who needs a ceiling, necessarily? There were clearly arches that went across here. Okay, so was this an interior courtyard? So you come in, and you've got this little threshold up, but then you've got the little threshold down on the other side. And then you've got this paved courtyard with, as you say, originally, the beautiful green patterning on the floor. We're looking at...
it's more intact in this chamber over here.
What was under it, yeah. And then hang on, if we came straight through, where are we? Another little threshold up, threshold down, and another big old room / courtyard.
It definitely looks like some of the Malathrim structures that we've seen in Mirkwood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got some ruins. This is the edge of it over here, right? Because, yeah, this is the edge of the... Now, it's still... The walls are still... They carry on being impressive, right? I mean, the cross-section of that wall, this is a wall that really means business. This is a
That is a tidal wave of rock.
Yeah, it really is. But then we've got these impractical doors. I still say they're impractical.
Not if you were looking for like a cross breeze.
Right, you could close the door but leave it open at the same time.
Or just basically, it's good ventilation to have lots of open areas because then you've got the wind whipping through with these beautiful it's basic air conditioning technology.
Right. Though if you have no roof in the first place, you know.
And Drastic makes the good comment that it's on a hill, so it's defensible. So it's one of those things where, you know, maybe they just assume we don't need doors. We'll get them all before they get up here.
Well, if you don't need doors, then why do you need walls? You know, I mean, I don't know. I agree, Hrothgar. Roofs are very first age. You know, the roof I'm fine with. And the doors, you know, whatever. You don't have to have a door all the way up. You can have though it seems a little odd to imagine these with like, you know, half doors, essentially. Enormous half doors.
Yeah, honestly, it's like walls are there, like, I don't know, to be like a windscreen when you don't want the wind. But like, basically, it's like it's good for leaning against when you've had too many parties.
Right. Hey, you know, so this courtyard over here, courtyard or room or whatever it is, over here on the, the east side, the east wing, has a really nice, complete and uninterrupted wall around the doorway. So you can see the full arch filigree and what it...
Yeah. I was mentioning this room is much more complete than the others.
Yeah. Oh, and this is where you can see the floor too? Yeah, you can see a little better.
Some of it, those beautiful green ribbons running through it. Which, you know,
Oh, yeah, and you can see the way that the green arches worked. So, yeah, see, so those fluted spires, they're clearly just decorative. I don't think they were supporting the roof. I think they're just, it's just decorative. Like all of these this random archwork up here. Right? The pointed arch above the door, the pointed door of the arch, and then you've got the broader arch that goes, you know, the rounded arch that goes all the way across. So you've got the spiked arch in the middle, which echoes the shape of the doorway itself below it, and then you've got the broader arch to echo the half circle that encompasses the whole. Yeah.
It's a picture frame for the sky. That's what it is. I mean, I think we're looking at it now as it was intended to, right up at the stars, with all these beautiful little bits forming a picture frame for it.
Yeah, perhaps so. Perhaps so. Also, like the fact that I couldn't decide there for a second whether this was a courtyard or a room also suggests something else to me, namely that once again, there's almost no sense of any internality in these Noldor structures any more in their fortification than in their party houses, you know?
Yeah, it's like there's a big communal living space.
Right. Yeah. So it's a defensible party's place, Drow Snake. They can say, like, okay, we know we're under attack, so we have to do things differently, but that doesn't mean the party has to stop, necessarily. Though you'd think the party would more or less stop after the fall of Eregion, but...
Yeah.
You know.
I'm pretty sure they built it here for the view first, and then later on for defense.
Maybe so. I mean, speaking of the view, this door would seem a door onto absolutely nowhere. I mean, I guess you can climb down over here with some difficulty.
It's just to look at.
Yeah.
Unless it all fell down into the ravine below.
Possible, I suppose. It was a while ago, but yeah, it does seem like this is more like the scenic lookout than anything else.
Yeah. Oh, look at those pretty mountains. Oh, look at the sun coming up, over the mountains.
Yeah.
In winter. Yeah, like right here. Yeah, right here. That's where the sun. That's east. That is where.
Right.
Where I'm pointing here. That is due east. That would have been a beautiful place
to
watch.
And so so why do you have this doorway here? Going in or out is a luxury. You have this doorway here so that the morning sun shines in through the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the sunrise would come streaming right in through here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to still be here at sunrise, Amathorn. We're a little bit...
no.
It's going to be a while still.
Most of us have work in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. And then do they have I didn't go over to the west. Let's see the western chamber and see if they have symmetry. I shouldn't let folks go soon too anyway.
Yep. The west chamber is the best chamber.
Right. If we go over to the west chamber, no.
Oh, they blocked it up.
No, I don't think there was a... Oh, wait, hang on. We take a little...
look
at some steps up here.
Yeah,
so maybe we're doing some management of terrain, and here's the western opening.
Well, also, those windows look like they've all been bricked up.
Yes, but there was no tall archway.
Window.
There was no symmetrical tall archway, but we can see over here, directly to the west of that gate, you had these very awkwardly tall rocks, right? So you'd have to get way up here.
Yeah, this looks like it's shifted some. Yeah, this definitely this rock.
So they didn't bother with this. Instead, they jogged it up to the right, up to the north, right, which raised it up a little bit. And then you've got the western view from here. Obviously, these trees are new compared to when this was built.
Yeah.
As presumably these trees are fewer than like 4,000 years old.
Yeah.
So this would have been a view into the sunset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that is interesting.
Maybe they were still salty about the West at this point.
Right. Well, no, I think they would have wanted to look into the West. Ooh, it's the last bridge.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
See, that is beautiful and tactical.
Yeah. So we can keep an eye on things from here.
But honestly, who's going to come up here? And it's such a nice day. Or evening.
Right.
Ooh, full moon.
It's always a full moon in Eriador.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
That is cool.
The moon doesn't actually change phase in any given night. You just have to go to certain areas to get a different one.
I didn't realize you could watch it moving so fast because it's elapsed time. That is so cool. I really do feel like an elf here just watching the moon go across the sky.
Where's that other ruin that we were in?
Huh.
Oh, it's down there.
Yeah.
I see. There's a little road.
Oh, yes.
That goes up towards it.
It's a bit behind those trees over there.
Yeah, slightly to the northeast of us there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Fascinating. Okay. All right. So next time we'll continue on down the road and see what we see.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay. I'll let folks go. Keeping folks late again tonight, and I shouldn't. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on another discussion and another exploration. And we will see everybody next week. We'll see some folks at TexMoot in Austin this weekend. And then I'll be back next week. So thanks, everybody. Good night now.